Welcome to Horticulture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture.
Greetings. Hello
Is
there,
it
Ray.
really just us today? Just the Brett and Ray show?
Just the two of us. We can make it if
I'm
we
glad
try.
the young people would not get that reference, but Brett, being the music aficionado
That's the
that he is, yeah, that he is. I like it. Good stuff.
What have you been up to, Ray?
Dealing with weeds in the garden and trying to figure out this excess. I know we alluded to it on the last show with Jason Bond. We talked about this very wet weather we've been having in Kentucky. But yeah, just enjoying garden bounty and also dealing with, the lawn still growing at a time when my lawn normally doesn't grow. But yeah, enjoying the season in Kentucky. I try not to rush the seasons in Kentucky, but I've got to admit, and I'm glad Alexis is not on here, but pumpkin spice lattes and all things Halloween. I've said it time and time again. I love the fall, but I do not want to wish away time. I don't want to wish away these awesome long days of summer in Kentucky. But about a midpoint in summer, around this time, my brain slowly starts to edge into, the fall vibe. So I'm trying not to do that this year. Trying not to do it.
Yeah, it's easy to. I think when more hours of the day you're sweaty than are not, you're not.
Yeah.
That, to
I'm
me,
looking
is
for
kind of
comfort. Yes.
yeah,
Maybe
that's the
what it is.
Rubicon that we have crossed for me into
Yes.
summer. I'm like, I'm ready for this.
It is a nexus that we
To
have
be over.
transversed. Yes, absolutely.
Well, just a casual question here. What do you think about AI?
Oh, it is
Artificial
everywhere.
intelligence, not the
Yeah, not
artificial insemination.
insemination. Two different things.
This is horticulture. This isn't,
And yeah, not
What-
animal science breeding 101, even though that's a good topic too. But I mean, it's absolutely everywhere. And when I see like a computer, if they want to sell more of it, they're like, oh, introducing the new AI PC. I'm still not for sure what that means, even though
the AI integrations are driving me crazy. Like,
Well, and
let
most-
me use it if I want to
Yes.
use it. Don't integrate it into my thing. Like, I don't.
Well, like on a computer, I'm torn. I love the tech stuff, but I'm like, that's mostly server side that's never going to be on the computer. So why does the computer need to? I realize that there's certain benefits but yeah, it's just everywhere. It's a huge buzzword, but it's also, to give it its credit, it is making some very real positive changes. But I think
So
it's one of those
on a
things that's
scale of
new.
1 to 10, like 1 is Sam Altman, OpenAI pushing it. He's into it. He's all about it. Without, it could just be a none of the negative connotations, just very pro AI. 10 is the kind of the Luddite, doesn't have a smartphone, has like a rotary phone. And so that's how they feel about AI, is even, more strongly than the AI is getting rid of AI is not far enough. That's a 10. So scale of 1 to 10, pro AI versus anti. Where do you think you fall on that scale?
More probably towards the pro with reservations. I'm trying to have my cake here and eat it too, Brett.
Like somewhere in the 2, 3, 4 range, somewhere in there?
I am, yeah. I mean, because I've seen, and used it in certain ways that I'm like, my goodness. That really helped me with workflow in general. Like somebody very smart, another agent I was talking to one day, she kind of framed it up nicely. She goes, it's not going to solve all of my problems. I'm not going to use it for something on a topic that I don't understand, because you still have to fact check AI very carefully. I think that's well established at this point, because it can get things wrong and does get things wrong. But she said, throughout the day, it helps with her general workflow, and there's a lot of different ways that she found to integrate AI into her daily tasks. And I believe that's where we're at right now. It's sort of the wild, wild west, where things are sort of fast and loose with the core understanding of AI and what it can and cannot do well, and how you should and should not be using it. And further, in our profession, we're in the educational professional field where, we're concerned with things like how do we use this and cite the document, do documentation of using AI. We're struggling with those things, and to make it as factual as possible. But all that being said, I guess I'm pro AI, but I know that there are limitations to what that is and is not. So
Yeah. I think one of the things that's it's easy to kind of conflate the AI technology and its promise or its downsides with like the way people are using it, or and particularly are talking about it,
yeah,
where there's just so much hype and
yeah,
such that
yeah.
it's like that it's driven the company that manufactures the chips, Nvidia, that make AI possible to be the largest company in the world.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
that hype machine is very real. It reminds me of some previous, bubbles and new technologies, and everybody's getting in on it. And so I've heard people, compare we got AI to the .com boom, where it's like whatever business you had, just add .com to it, register the domain, and now suddenly your company is somehow worth 10 times as much. Well, it turns out that it's not. That speculative value like that
Yeah.
has this effect. But there's two reasons why I bring up the AI thing. One, I wanted to hear your thoughts on it. I would say if you're in the 2, 3, 4 range, I'm in the 6, 7, 8 range. I
Mhm.
think I'm trying to be more open and less of just a hater on vibes alone, and try to be a little more reasonable about it. And so I started using it some more, particularly ChatGPT. I'll go in
Mhm.
and just I'll say ChatGPT, say nice things about me, and it just do that for
Yeah.
2 hours. So that's the extent that I've used it for, and that worked great. But for this episode, I used it, but so that's one reason why, and I'm going to get to that in a second. The other reason why is I think today this is going to be the second part episode covering um, the life and times in agriculture of Ray Tackett. We did
It's
a
been
previous
been here for a
episode
minute.
on we did a previous episode on released on June 22nd, I think. It's called Hands in the Dirt, Head in the Clouds, and it was a very cool, for me, very cool experience to be able to talk with you, and you were very forthcoming about your life growing up in Eastern Kentucky on several different farms in Johnson County and Lawrence County.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So through that time period, you've seen some major changes, and I think some would say that maybe this AI thing with an extension is going to be the next big change that defines the beyond there. So if we're starting with today and kind of looking backward at some of the other changes you've been through in that time, we're going to reflect on those here in a few minutes. But here's one of the downsides of AI. I fed it. I asked AI to summarize that last episode for me, just to kind of see. I was there. I was asking questions, so I kind of remember. And as I said to you, or as I just verified with you, your primary stories from that episode were in Johnson County and Lawrence County. And Horticulture says in the Horticulture podcast episode, Hands in the Dirt, Head in the Clouds, Ray mentions that he grew up in Elliott and Carter counties in Eastern Kentucky, that neither of those was the case. They are not super far away, a little further north, up toward West Virginia, toward the West Virginia border,
Mhm.
almost up toward Ohio, relative to where we were talking about. But so there's some little bits and pieces here that maybe aren't correct, and so on the AI side, we'll see
Yeah,
how much that's gonna.
and truly the devil's in the details, and in our line of work, the details are very important.
Yeah. But I think a couple of the other things, in case you didn't hear that episode, you go back and check it out, because I think it was really nice to hear Ray's just perspective. But he was focused on his personal story, um, talking about working with crops, working with livestock, lessons he learned from his parents, and a lot of his formative experiences, primarily through the 80s and 90s, and then going to Berea, learning a lot there, opening up opportunities and thoughts about where he was going to go next, and then going out into the professional world. Ray's been you worked a couple of years before joining Extension, right?
Yes, different jobs. The last position that I held, significant position, before I entered Extension, was a commercial landscape position. Working with landscape crews, and I also working in the field. Not a lot of design work, some design work, but mainly implementation of plans. commercial drawing. So yeah, I had some experience before I came into extension, but it wasn't too long after I graduated from Berea that I entered the extension service.
And
And you
what
never know, if you're going to be at a job for a long time or not. And it just turns out with the extension, I've been here a long time. So
and so this is what county?
I came into extension in 96 in Grant County, which is towards the northern part of the central region of Kentucky. So north central of Kentucky. That's where I came in and was there, for over 4 years. You mentioned we started this conversation with AI, and it makes me reflect back, which I don't do a lot of sometimes, but it's pretty incredible. Here we are talking about the merits of algorithms and large language model engines, this high
Mhm.
level kind of stuff that we're trying to wrap our heads around and make sense of huge amounts of data, information. But when I first came into extension, it's almost like it's come somewhat full circle. When I first came into extension in 96, when I was at school at Berea, 92 to 96 with my undergrad, about midway through that journey at Berea, we started getting everything was networked, the early days of networking computers. And we started getting homework assignments on through the network and I got my first email at Berea, first email address I'd ever had. So that became sort of familiar. Used that for a couple of years. But when I first came into extension, I walked in the office there and there was a computer sitting in the corner that was not networked. Okay. It was not networked, but what was encouraging was I looked around and I said, oh, I know I'm entering the business of having to know lots of facts and lots of things in extension because that's what extension agents do. They know a lot about things. And I thought, well, my goodness, if I can't access the World Wide Web, what am I going to do? So that was the reality when I first came in. I did not have a computer that was networked. Now that got remedied shortly after I started Grant County, but it's pretty incredible to think that my reference for answering questions was a large bank of filing cabinets with printed out publications, numbered publications, which I still fondly remember that because back then in the 90s we maintained these, just everybody had tons of filing cabinets and meticulous files maintained by topic. Maintain those very carefully because that's how we answered questions. When we got a question, if we did not know the answer to the question straight away, which often happened, we had to run over to a filing cabinet. We all had long phone cords. We would run over to a filing cabinet, flip through there, and we were pretty familiar with thousands of files. And we would manually search through, find a numbered publication, research-based publication, and answer the question. And now here we are, Brett, talking about AI. So that's kind of the reality when I came
Yeah.
into extension was a lot different world. Access to information was different. A lot was different then. But yeah, started out in Grant County.
One of the, we're in the middle of this search for our new extension dean in the College of Ag. And one of the candidates mentioned, all these folks have been around for a little while, across this period of time that Ray's talking about. And one of the candidates mentioned working on an extension program and sending it out, mailing it out to agents as a CD, a
Yes.
burned CD, compact disc that they could then use. And that was at that time, like that was kind of like
Pretty
crazy
forward
forward
thinking.
thinking.
It
You could
was.
you could
And
send this little disc that was, the size of a, like you could fit it in you put it in your car CD player if you needed to, and it could hold hundreds of publications or programs or videos or
we
whatever.
loved it. And that could be updated more quickly because with paper files, I mean, when publications were updated, we had maybe 50 copies of an alfalfa publication. I started as an ag and natural resources agent, and then halfway through my career switched over to horticulture. But when I was ag and natural resources, we covered plant and animal sciences, more generalized in nature. But let's say we had an alfalfa publication and it was a lot of waste and the process was slow. When you got an updated publication, it would come as hard copies in a packet, a bound packet, and then you had to throw away all the old copies. And it was a constant process of keeping hard copies up to date in these large filing cabinets. And so here comes the AgDisc, and that was like a revolution because we could get those quicker, and publications we were like, what's a PDF? Yes, I'm that old, folks. But we learned how to search PDFs and find answers more quickly on publications that were updated more regularly through these AgDiscs. So about once a year, we got these AgDiscs with updated publications, and that became like our first kind of a quasi electronic filing system. That so as agents, I know we're talking in house here, but as agents, it allowed us to answer questions, more quickly, more efficiently, and a lot of times we could just find the information and just it made us that much better as agents. So yeah, that was a big moment in extension with the way we did business.
Would you say, so I have several questions, but would you say that the amount of time at that point that agents spent, out in the field was different? Was the number of programs offered different? Like what are some other kind of differences about the way that information about agriculture was being spread?
The rate, the biggest way, and it's interesting to think about it that way, but there were differences back then in that annual updates of whatever commodity you were talking about seemed to be more elevated, more important. And I'll give you an example, like a row crop like corn. That annual corn meeting or annual commodity meeting, whatever you were doing, seemed to be far more important because before the internet became widely accepted and widely available, and everyone, had computers at home that had access to the internet. In the early days, even if you had access to the internet, not a lot of publications from all the universities were up there. Okay, just frame that out right now. So, how are you getting information? You had to call someone that had those paper files across the US that had these big banks of filing cabinets, and to get the latest information, because in extension, that's one of the major things we do is we do research. We produce and generate information. We're the genesis of a lot of information, fresh and hot off the press, folks. So to get that information, folks had to come out to these meetings, and typically the format was you would have a big like rollout once a year of the latest, greatest information. You would have specialists there, and the meetings tended to be a little larger. Attendance in person tended to be a little larger because if you wanted or to want you, let's say a tobacco meeting, those were the best example I have in the 90s. You would have an annual tobacco meeting. It was not uncommon to have 150, 200 people at those meetings. That was the rollout of all the latest, greatest varieties, the black shank research, the blue mold research, disease control, soil management, all of that rolled out with the latest varieties, and everybody attended those. We had printouts of these large manuals, these production manuals, and it was a whole event. So that was really different. It's almost like not almost, you had to attend those events to have the most up-to-date information. You couldn't log on and do a general search through Google because guess what? Google didn't exist. There was no such thing as just Google that because it literally wasn't invented at that time. So that was significantly different, I guess, in the way that we did business on a day-to-day basis. Was seems like we had more meetings like that were thematic. And, we had our educational programs then, just like we do now. That's one of our strengths and extension is community-based programming that's locally driven. But then it was even more critical because you didn't have this incredible access to all the information from not only the University of Kentucky, but wherever you were at, wherever you were listening from, you probably have access to that information now. So,
I think
we do things a little different now.
what's kind of interesting, this has me thinking. I wasn't really expecting to go down this technology, interfacing of technology, and the work that we do, but I think it is an interesting one. And I know you and I are both kind of tech thinking people in different ways, which is really cool. Sometimes we talk about specs on computers, and Alexis and Jessica sort of
They roll their eyes at us a little.
start gagging
Yeah.
in response. But the extension service itself kind of developed alongside the spreading of the telephone in the United States.
Mhm.
And so in other words, you went into your office and you saw, oh, this computer didn't have the internet, or it's not networked in any
Mhm.
way. There were agents who started, well, there wasn't an office probably,
Yeah.
and most of your clientele didn't even have a telephone.
Yeah.
As far as being able to get a hold of somebody and be able to help them and talk to them, would you say for you all, the telephone was kind of the primary means of communication with your
Yeah.
clientele? Like what's that kind of vibe like?
We were on the phone a whole lot more. And I guess it wasn't all bad then because you had a singular form of communication. a singular form. We were on the phone for longer periods of time. It was not uncommon for me to be on the phone 4 to 5 hours a day on a landline, because once you went out into the field, you had to have all the details worked out, because once you got there, you had what you had
Yeah.
to make the site visit with. And to go over details, we didn't have emails, we didn't have text, we didn't have any of those other alternate forms of communication. So that's good and bad. You had one form of communication to focus on. That was a phone call, or people would come into your office and visit you directly. And that's still a common thing to do when people really want a high level of understanding or want to make sure they understand you completely. It's not uncommon to get us, in an in-office visit, and that's great. But back then, it was very much focused on that single form of communication. That was a telephone. That was the first point of contact, and it's the way we did business. And I remember the first, and I thought I was big time, Brett. I thought I had arrived. I had a bag phone, and only people of a certain generation, maybe born in the 1900s, will understand what I'm talking about. But it was a Motorola bag phone, and it looked like I was some military guy carrying this big, chunky, Velcro, flappy phone around that was in its own self contained case. But I had the usage of that thing, and you were charged by the minute. And I didn't get that to the very end of, I don't know, 98, 99. I got a
And
bag phone. It
this
was
is a mobile phone.
a mobile phone.
Yeah.
It was a bag phone. And so and there was one for the entire office. So we checked it out when we were out of the office. We were going to be out, making visits or whatever. You maybe had 50% cell coverage if you were lucky. But that changed the way we did business, was just that phone. And it was one phone for the entire office, mobile phone. It was very expensive. We would check it out and take it, to where we were going, and then we'd check it back in when we got back. So we became a bit more mobile with that. You couldn't do anything on that thing besides make and receive phone calls, but still, that started to change the way that we did business. Um, Beyond people bringing in a plant or some kind of insect sample or whatever sample they had of the day, they had to bring that in, or we had to go look at it, full stop. That was the only way we could accomplish those things. Now it's just, I think sometimes we take for granted we can take a perfectly crystal clear picture of an insect and do a lot of identification right over mobile phones.
Send it
Or
instantaneously. Yeah.
yes. Yeah, it's pretty incredible when I think back on it and reflect back on it. The one thing that hasn't changed is we work with individuals, but the way that we do that has really changed, and the speed at which we do that has really changed
Hmm.
over time. Probably Brett more than any of that. And I think more and more about this. And I talked with a group of new agents and stumbled onto this just kind of ad hoc as I was talking to them. And it's a concept I think more and more about as being a field agent and working with communities, with their issues and questions. And I told this this group of new agents this. I said, I think that the questions have gotten tougher over time. And they said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, if you think about it, people already have the ability from their phone, these incredible mobile computers, they can look up the basic information for a thing, the seeding rate of fescue for their home lawns. They can find that pretty accurately in seconds by doing a general search, University of Kentucky fescue seeding rate. They can get a rate. Generally, when we get questions now, they're of the second order, not the first order. The first order is basic, general, baseline information. People have already found that out, or they have a problem that's beyond them searching for a problem. So when we get questions now, they tend to be more in depth, that just information by itself is not going to solve the problem. So I think over time, if I really reflect back from the 90s going into the early, 2000s, questions started getting tougher. People come in, they would say, I've already looked at your website. I've already read the home lawn publication on diseases and nothing looked familiar. And I'm like, oh, so they've already done their base research. So whatever they're coming to me with is a little bit more novel, or it's not the easy stuff. So we don't get as many softball questions as we used to.
I mean, that's awesome. To me, that means that through both extension activity, through websites,
Mm.
through everything else, people are getting more advanced information.
They're
They're
still
more,
being supported, but it's different.
they
It's
have more access, and if
yeah,
they can come to you with a harder question that you can work
yeah,
through together, I mean, that's pretty darn cool,
it is.
in my opinion. As far as thinking about what I understand, it makes the job harder because suddenly you don't have everybody like, oh, I don't know anything about this at all, and can, oh yeah, I can show you this basic thing. We definitely see that in the
Do you?
on our side of things, where there's people who have kind of thought through a bunch of stuff, and all the basics are kind of exhausted
And
already.
you guys deal with a lot of lots and lots of interesting topics on specialty crops and things. So I bet you guys have seen some changes over time, and you've been here for a while as well, right, Brett?
That's right. So I started in 2015. And this isn't the Brett episode. This is the Ray episode. But I started in 2015.
I'll pick your
Uh,
brain
I s-
too.
I started when we were the only people that I knew who were in this world doing webinars.
Yeah,
We did it
that
on
was really
Adobe.
advanced back then.
We
Yeah.
did it on Adobe Connect at first, and you had to like pre-upload your PowerPoint into it, and then it would mess it up and
How
reformat it.
scary was that? Yeah.
Yeah, but we had been on Zoom since 2016, so we were ready when the pandemic happened. We were ready to stream live, and we did stream live starting in March of 2020.
Yeah.
But 2015, even 2015 to now, I think thinking about the website traffic and thinking about measuring that and understanding that and how you use online resources to supplement in-person resources
Mhm.
versus virtual, a lot of that has shifted too. Yeah, well, I have a million questions that I could ask you about this, but about that the this kind of first chapter. But so you were in Grant County starting in '96, and then
Yes.
how long were you there?
I was there until 2000 and 2000. I transferred into an ag and natural resources position into the eastern part of the state. Uh, Completely different counties, and a
What
lot
was it? What
started.
county?
Floyd County. I'm sorry.
Floyd County.
Floyd County, that's in the eastern part of the state. It's about 85% forested, which I was very interested in, small farm issues and natural resources issues. And that was more of a home area for me. So I wanted to get back
Yeah.
home and I wanted to cover some of those topics that I enjoyed, but really enjoyed my time in Grant County. But a lot started happening while I was in Grant County. Farm Bill came out, and then something called the Master Settlement for Tobacco came out. And then later, that came out in 98. I had to look back at my notes
Yeah. Yeah.
to see the Master Settlement Agreement came out in 1998. It was agreement between tobacco companies to help fund some kind of offset some of the health issues that
Yeah. So
smoking
if
led
in
to.
case anybody is interested in the too long did we Ray and I are pushing. If you have any cachet with Dr. Will Snell in the Department of Agricultural Economics,
Yes.
we are pushing him to let us do a short run podcast on the tobacco settlement and its lead up to it and its effects thereafter. He has had a career that basically mirrored that entire period, and he has very,
Pretty
very
incredible
interesting
time.
connections, but also perspective on it. But anyway, there's this idea that like, okay, there's this product, and the tobacco companies have claimed that it's not hurting people for a long time. Turns out that it was, and they knew, and so then the states banded together and sued the tobacco companies.
Mm.
The tobacco companies then settled, so money got kicked out to all the different states to be able to do whatever they wanted with it.
Yeah, and in Kentucky, it just so happened every state handled those monies different, and that money's still being tobacco companies are still paying out that money. But that happened in '98, and in Kentucky, 50% of those funds went back to agriculture. The balance of the fund went to other things, and different states once again handled that differently. But a large portion of those funds, 50%, went back to agriculture. I think that founded the Kentucky Ag Development Group, the fund there. So we knew big changes were coming with that. And the really big changes came a little bit later in 2004 when the tobacco quota system went away, and that was formed through federal legislation 66 years before. There was this that basically was a kind of a price control and production control federal system, the quota system here in Kentucky. We're very familiar with it.
Well, some of us aren't. So,
Yeah,
what did that
basically,
mean? Like from the farmer's perspective, what did
in
the
a
quota mean?
nutshell, that meant that tobacco income was very, very consistent, and you could rely on tobacco income year in and year out on a small scale or large scale because you had a quota set amount that you could grow, and it
So
kept the price at a certain level.
if I had a 5 pound, or sorry, 5 pound, if I had a 5 acre farm, I would be, if I were part of
A
the
certain
system, I
quota.
would be allotted a certain number of pounds that I could produce
Yes,
and have essentially a guaranteed market for.
yes, pretty much. As long as you kept the quality at a minimum standard, you would take that to market. The price could vary some based on your individual quality standards, but you were almost guaranteed a certain minimum price as long as you met minimum quality standards. And if you didn't decide to produce that year, you could sell other people your quota for that year. So there's a lot of that going on in Kentucky. I
And
guess
if
to kind of, yeah,
like
go
if
ahead, Brett.
you had 100 acres and you could produce it more efficiently, or you could produce it whatever, you couldn't go in, like if you went in, you couldn't go in and say, I'll sell it to you for cheaper and undercut me and push me out of the market because I already have my quota, right?
Yeah, it kept the price very controlled, and it kept overproduction from being an issue is the biggest thing. And that came about as part of the Great Depression, some legislation that happened there. Real interesting story there. That's why I'd love to hear Dr. Snell. We're going to send him
Totally.
this episode, and just so that we're plugging this hard, I'd love to hear more of the history myself. It's very interesting, but it kind of that program from the 30s all the way up through 2004 when that program the buyout occurred in Kentucky, it kind of went away, but that program from the 30s to 2004 really established kind of the fabric and backbone to a large extent of kind of the small farms in Kentucky and the number of farms. I think in its heyday there were 60,000 plus farms. It seems like I'm pulling that from memory that were growing tobacco. Now we're less than 1,000 farms
Mhm.
that's growing tobacco, and the farms tend to be larger. But that was probably the single biggest, as far as farming wise, not necessarily within the organization. We were talking about AI and how we handle phone calls, but this is in the field. That's the single biggest thing that happened. And I was kind of right on the edge of that when the master settlement came out in 98. And then later on, I was in Floyd County when the tobacco buyout program happened. Now, we oftentimes say that the master settlement kind of funded changes, but what 2004 did was really light a fire under the fact that that program was going away. And payments were made, I think, over, Brad, what, a 10-year span? And then it was in. That was done. There was no more tobacco quota system in place. So that really, really got in people's heads that, man, my small farmers relied on tobacco to pay the bills year in and year out. And that's kind of going away. And it
Mhm.
did go away for most of the small producers because it seemed like, like many commodities that could be produced more efficiently and cheaply on large scales. So once the quota system went away, it seemed like the production went to larger operations, which that's kind of the course it went.
Yeah, and then
But that
you
was
also you
huge,
also
huge,
see
huge
a
event.
gradual, or at first gradual and then more steep decline in consumption as well. So
Yeah,
you
that
had
kind of went along hand in hand. That started in that, we started feeling that a lot in 98 because there were some other things that went along with that legislation or that buyout package, not buyout. I'm confusing my words, but that settlement
the settlement.
agreement.
Mhm.
You can't advertise to youth. You can't, do smoking ad campaigns and cartoons and things like that. But even before that, before all of this in 98 happened, there was, you could see the decline in the tobacco usage in the United States. So just one thing led to another. And really, that's once again, the biggest change that I've seen in agriculture in the state. And a lot of things happened during that time period. A lot of changes came out of that. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, I think I hate to keep harkening back to origins, but like at that point, the extension service as a concept had only been around for like 85, 86 years by the year 2000. So it's not like has this really long, stretch of existing, and it had been through two world wars, it had been through subsequent wars, economic booms, change in science, etc. And now you've talked about just within 5-year period, essentially the advent of using the internet in extension, and then this huge seismic shift that you
Yeah.
really, in order to understand late 20th century Kentucky agriculture and really U.S. agriculture to some extent,
Yeah.
you have to
Other states.
understand this thing that happened. So what was the so you're in Grant County to start. Big tobacco contingent in Grant County?
There's a lot of tobacco in Grant County, and I started hearing producers. We'd have those big tobacco meetings for my time there. The spring tobacco meeting, late winter, early spring tobacco meeting that was very well attended. Lots of folks, anybody that was raising tobacco attended those annual meetings. But we began to hear talk, of things like this, the wheels starting to turn when some of this stuff happened in 1998. We started hearing people considering other things, just in a sort of a passerby sort of conversation. Guys that were doing hay started saying things like, "Well, I think I'll do more hay."
Mm-hmm.
Or if you were doing corn or soybeans, or, a lot of people had cattle in Grant County as well when I was there at that time. And they started considering their options, their diversification options, in a passersby sort of way. But, later on, when the program officially ended in 2004, that ramped up that conversation, that elevated that conversation a great deal, a
Yeah.
great, great deal. Really elevated it. So all that started happening while I was in Grant County, a county that had a lot of tobacco production. I mean, we would spend all spring, with our float beds, tobacco transplants. We'd spend the entire spring taking our DISC 4 meters, conductivity meters, and just helping everybody make sure the fertility rates were just right. We would spend all day, every day, doing lots of visits on that, and it dominated our time in the spring. Most agents
Mm-hmm.
that had a lot of tobacco, and at a point that most of that went away, and it was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
What
Well,
a change!
it's a very intensive, very like pretty technical
Mm-hmm.
and challenging crop to produce.
Oh yes,
As
yes,
far as
absolutely.
labor goes, disease, fertility, most of them starting their own transplants in these float
Mm-hmm.
beds. I mean, it's a whole, and it starts relatively early. You got to get your starts ready. You got to, and then there's these stages throughout the year. I mean, it's to have a system of technical assistance in place to support that, and then for that to go away is a very challenging. Like, as far as the farmers themselves, that was hard, but retooling that system to try to,
Mm-hmm.
what do we do next? We had this thing, and now we don't have that thing anymore.
Yeah, that stability, that high value crop that you could, make it make sense on 5 acres or 300 acres. With
Yeah.
the quota system in place, you could make it make sense, and that's rare in the agriculture world to have something that worked across multiple scales.
Mm-hmm.
And in East Kentucky, you could have 2 or 3 acres in a bottomland, and that would provide X amount of money, and that was the backbone of the farm. And when that started going away, it really changed our conversation and extension. And I know even the organization you're with, Brett, I think we mentioned it off the podcast in the beginning. But several organizations, support organizations, arose in Kentucky to support this concept of we need to diversify and look for alternatives. And
Well,
that
yeah,
really was the conversation.
it's no coincidence. So I saw earlier that the Kentucky Ag Development Board was celebrating its 25th anniversary this year in 2025. The Center for Crop Diversification also celebrating our 25th anniversary in 2025.
Yep.
It wasn't just fertile ground for good ideas in 2000 that were percolating. It was this response to this. I mean, this
Yes.
exact thing where it kind of, okay, the settlement happens. We need to figure out. We need to think about diversification as these crops phase out, essentially, or
Yeah.
are phased out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the interesting things, there was a little bit of an assumption, which I follow the logic, that vegetables could replace tobacco because they're very similar growing systems. A lot of them are grown from transplant. I just mentioned they're complex. They have certain nutrient needs. The production system itself, with depending on how you want to irrigate, you're starting transplants. Lots of disease that's kind of unique or different. Very labor intensive. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between tobacco and vegetable crops The one big difference is the markets.
I was going to say the marketing and infrastructure or lack of
Yeah.
infrastructure. That was a big thing that tripped us up a lot. And there's some just amazing examples of tobacco farms that pivoted away from that crop. And even here locally, where I'm at in Scott County, Kentucky, there's local orchards that they were tobacco operations in days gone by, and now they are these incredibly diverse, vibrant production systems that they went into orchards and other facets of agricultural production away from tobacco. There's some good examples of those, but it was pretty incredible. I mean, really, on how different vegetables was, because we talked about a lot on this. We talk a lot about on this podcast. Producing is one thing, marketing is another.
Mm-hmm.
Well, once you got the tobacco up and ready for market, you took it to market and you watched the auctioneers go by and they did their auctioneer speak, and you got this price per pound. Then you got your check, went home. Vegetables were not that.
Mm-hmm.
And even before you got to the point of marketing, you had the very fact that a tomato perishes very quickly once you let it go past a certain stage. That's all part of marketing, I guess, but the marketing was different. You had to put a lot of effort into marketing, because at the time and to this very day, there's certain levels of markets that don't exist in Kentucky or don't exist widely, I guess. So it's not like you're just growing a crop and taking that to market and it's all sold and you're done with it. And that tripped a lot of people up. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and also the labor required. I mean, crops set your mind to a certain scale. And tobacco, let's say your scale maybe 10 acres, and you had this number of this many people helping you get that crop in. So our minds were set around kind of tobacco in a way, farms that were involved with that. Well, that didn't translate really well to an acre of strawberries and the number of people that you needed to 10 acres of strawberries. That's incredibly different than 10 acres of tobacco. Even though we say tobacco is labor intensive,
Mm.
man, once you got into certain vegetable crops, they took way more labor to bring that crop in. So kind of we had to rewire our brains and the way we thought about things. So all of that was a very steep learning curve. And but that's essentially what kind of we worked with folks through that process. It was an exciting time, and words like value added, CSAs, direct to market, all of these things became buzzwords at first, and then they kind of became reality. Today we see a lot of those things in just everyday communities. Um, and I think at tobacco, the tobacco quota system going away kind of gave rise very quickly to those things. But there was just this period of just sort of helter skelter um, growth of those things, and kind of people trying different things. It's kind of the spaghetti approach, kind of throwing things against the wall and seeing what worked for their family. It was kind of a terrifying time, but also a very exciting time because you're involved in people that are trying to do new things. But yeah, all of that happened in those early 2000s once the program went away. Uh,
Yeah, 2002 was when the Kentucky Proud program was started to
so it happened
kind
a
of
little bit before then, but they kind of saw.
try
I
to
think a lot of these
boost.
groups saw the writing on the wall with that
Yeah.
1998. Yeah.
Well, I think, and that money came out of that initial ag
Hmm.
development,
Yeah.
decision that to like, okay, this is one, and it still
Yeah.
is one of the big programs that they fund to this
Hmm.
day, has been the Kentucky Proud program, is this attempt to create a brand for Kentucky products that had cachet with customers. And some of you all may remember the we used to have these things called television commercials when people watched normal television, and there was one locally that it featured some famous UK basketball players from the 90s, um, the Unforgettables. It was Richie Farmer and John Pelfrey, and they're standing at like a grocery store, kind of like produce stand, and they're pitching Kentucky Proud, and it was a very like, what a snapshot of that moment in time, because one of the things that's run through all of this was Kentucky basketball. That was also like the heyday of that era of Kentucky basketball, the kind of
It
Patino
was good. It was
years.
good times. Yeah.
Yeah, it was, and like those things, I think of like UK basketball, the state fair, tobacco, but then also the exploration of things like sweet sorghum and emus and I don't, do you remember the emu?
Jerusalem, yeah,
Yeah,
emus, boar goats, Jerusalem artichokes.
yeah.
There are so many things, Brett. I mean, they all fall under the heading, I guess. Would you put them under specialty crops? I mean, I
Like
don't know
sort of
how if
alternative products.
yeah, we were all looking for, and I think it was a little naive in the beginning. We were all looking for something to replace one-to-one tobacco.
Yeah,
And
I think that I
I
was
don't think it's,
always
has it been done yet?
I
I
always
don't,
I always said I said that the story of a lot of Kentucky agriculture of the last 25 years has not been trying to find the silver bullet but to find the tobacco colored bullet, and we haven't
the
done it
burley
yet.
bullet.
The burly bullet, and I think you can point to the hemp craze as
Mm,
this thing that felt familiar in a way,
mhm.
and that you some of the hopes and dreams associated with that were put onto that ended up in some cases playing out a little bit, like they ended up working out a little bit, in other cases ended up in tragedy as far
Yeah,
as
yeah.
markets go and ability to buy and all that kind of stuff.
I
It's
think it's
partially
people were looking
attributable to
always looking for the next big thing, right?
that imagination. Yeah, and that we once had the big we once had the big thing here,
And
and
had
we
it for a
had
long
like
time.
the comparative advantage geographically, historically. We had the organization set up that we could organize growers in a way that, as you said, it translated across scale.
Mhm.
The fact that the product that we were growing was addictive and often a lifelong use product, and the customer base would sort of always be expanding. I mean, all of those things combined, it's going to be it will never I don't know we'll never see the direct one-to-one replacement for that product, and I think that people have come to realize that across time, but it's still the ghost of tobacco still hovers heavy on Kentucky agriculture to me.
Yeah, I probably established the fabric of, like I said, the small farm network in Kentucky. So that's certainly still felt to this very day. We started out this conversation a little bit different in that we were looking at some of the technology and tools and the way we handled questions. But Brett, thank goodness that the technology and access to information improved over time, because I think about, as access to information did improve, it improved at a time when people were really looking into things like specialty crops, like your organization. That, oh, what's the title? I threw it out in the very beginning, but before it was the Center for Crop Diversifications, it was the New Crops Opportunity Center, and
That's
it
right.
was just that. It's had a name change, but I mean, I guess the thought there was looking for alternatives and looking, and it still is looking for,
Mhm.
uh, crops that may not be mainstream that may have potential, whether or not it's related to replacing tobacco or not. But
Yeah.
thank goodness the tools that we use to do our job have improved. And, we started out the conversation also by saying, we're trying to figure out AI. Is it going to take our job? That's everybody's asking
Mhm.
that. Are you in an industry where it's going to take, your job? And everybody's nervous about that. I know programmers in different industries, there's been lots of job consolidation. In some cases, it's the people that coded the AI that now are without a job because of the AI. But in certain industries like our own, we also mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, we were in the business of, looking at, high rigor, refereed, research based information, generating that. But don't you think, Brett, that that's still going to be a critical component of the jobs that we do? Because I had this conversation with someone the other day. I'm like, well, what if nobody's producing the information that the AI is using? Because doesn't the large language models, it has to crawl and catalog and index information. What if there's no research based information anymore? And I had to stop and think about that. I said it, and then I stood back. I was like, yeah, I guess that is true. As a delivery, one of the delivery mechanisms that we're using to lay our hands on information, as it
Yeah.
relates to this conversation.
I think it's one of the things that people don't understand about AI is that It's not exactly, but it's essentially a more advanced version of a search engine
Hmm.
where it's only as good as the information that it has access to, that it
Yeah.
has digested, that it has crawled, etc. And so we've essentially done, 100+ years of research, much of which is online, and that is the basis on which a lot of the recommendations that AI would get for certain crops or whatever is acting on. And so it's actually the information has been being established. The backlog of information has been being established all that time, and AI is just figuring out really cool, fast ways of accessing it, summarizing it, pulling it together. And I think some of those kinks will be worked out across time. But I think the actual generation of the information in the first place, as you're saying, I don't know that we're gonna lose our role in that, because it's otherwise you're gonna have just
That,
basically an ability to really uniquely really thoroughly search meaningless stuff that other AI engines have generated and put out. It's just this going to be this kind of slop tornado without actual substantive human products as the basis.
and it's very relevant to the conversation. But we talked about all these incredible changes. Over my career, certainly, tobacco and protected agriculture, the rise of high tunnels in Kentucky. There's been so many things we could point to, and every time something comes up like that, a big change, I feel pretty blessed to have been, in a job where people look to you for answers, or they look to you to frame out the information. And I used to say there was a lot of friction when I first entered the extension between information that was contained at the university and getting that in the hands of the end consumer. There's lots of frictions. In the very beginning, people had to come to my office and get a copy. I'd make them a paper copy of a publication to give to them, pre widespread internet. Lots of friction. Now there's a lot of push. AI has given this incredible frictionless push of information, but it doesn't always put the frame in perspective. And really, it's like drinking from a fire hydrant. You've got and AI tries to bring that stream of information down and coalesce that into some answer, but it doesn't always do a great job at that. And that's still one of the core functions of our job, is to take research based information and make that make sense in local communities. That's sort of what we do, but you know AI is just another like grammar tool and a number crunching tool. It's just another tool to help us make sense of a growing body of information, to make sense of some of this research information. But we always look at those things critically and how that can support us in all of these changes. We're kind of talking about almost two different things during this conversation, I guess, Brett. We're talking about the tools that we use to get information to communities, and we're talking about the changes that we support in communities. It's sort of
Yeah,
all wrapped up in one from an extension perspective.
I think in either case you're going to have your brain wrapped around how to use this technology, what's appropriate, what your values
Hmm.
and what your orientation is to it, and limitations for use, etc. If you're going to remain relevant anyway, because people are going to use this.
Oh, sure, they're
Um,
using it
it's
right now.
it's a yeah, it's too tempting of a thing to use, and any scolding or moralizing that we do about it is going to just fall on deaf ears. Well, I have two more questions,
Yeah.
and they're kind of mirror images of the same question. So as you look back and you think back to your, I don't know, kind of that maybe late 90s, early 2000s period, both technologically, culturally, agriculturally, what would you say is something that we have lost since then that you kind of regret, or that you feel like, maybe I don't feel so good about that, and something that we have gained since then that you think is a really good thing?
And what's our time period for consideration?
I think from those early periods,
Yeah.
maybe like almost pre-internet, almost pre um, uh, tobacco settlement, like that kind of era when you were first getting your start to
Mhm.
now.
It kind of, I'll pick on public radio. It's like we've lost the public radio, the ag world, and that was a unifying factor, which to me was like tobacco. It was a crop that people could, was almost universal. It was a language that we spoke. It's like you were in Kentucky, most farms had tobacco and something, tobacco and cattle, tobacco and corn, tobacco and soybeans, but you've lost that unifying theme that brought people together, that everybody could sit around and talk about. That's not a bad or good thing. It's not
Did you
about
say
tobacco.
public radio?
It's almost like public radio when
I
we
see.
when we had that in the past, when radio was the only form of common communication. I
I
should
see.
further flesh that out a little bit. But it's like when you only had three radio stations and
I
pre
see.
TV, you had a form of communication. You had something to unify people.
Hmm. And
So
maybe a sense of more in common within the agricultural
a sense of
community.
community around something. In this case,
Mhm.
it was tobacco
Mm.
that was on big and small farms. And so that's something we not, I guess, as we diversify, that's also a strength and a weakness. So the strength was we all had a common language around a crop, and that crop just happened to be tobacco in the past. But the weakness of that is that once that one crop went away, you were left scrambling. So a good that came out of that is that farms really looked more critically at profitability. They looked at sustainability. They looked at revenue streams. They looked at what was appropriate beyond that one crop. And so we have a lot of awesome aspects of Kentucky agriculture that expanded from that point forward with that crop going away. Things like I mentioned CSAs earlier, this direct to consumer products, but not only direct to consumer products, but value added products. And all of those are very positive things. And I think the landscape of Kentucky agriculture grew a lot more diverse, a lot more robust in certain ways. Now, granted, you don't have the direct one-to-one replacement for that high value crop that's scaled across, large and small operations. But at the same time, our fabric, our tapestry is a lot more diverse now than it was. So that weakness, hopefully we've flipped that a little bit and we've turned the corner on that and we've diversified in many different directions. Some would say, well, you're more fragmented now. Well, that's not always a bad thing when you're trying to diversify revenue streams, to put that in economic terms. I guess, Brett, was that not a political answer or what?
No, that's a good answer. I think
Yeah,
I think especially the notion of like the shared the shared cultural frame that
yeah,
was also so rooted in agriculture. Because
yeah.
I think you could also make an argument that with the loss of tobacco and tobacco farming, some of our broad cultural identity within Kentucky slipped out of agriculture into other
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
Because it's not like, oh, we're now, now we're a beef state,
Mhm.
culturally, though that we do have a lot of beef cattle and a lot of folks who are doing that on smaller and larger scales.
Mhm.
It's not the same. It doesn't have that same kind of cachet with a broader culture. So I mean, and I don't know if that's just a shifting away from agriculture in general, as we're seeing it happen across as we've seen happen over the United States in the last 30, 40 years. But that definitely, it's like corn in Iowa. It had there's this identity association with a given crop.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, yes, change can be painful. It can also be good to I guess it's sort of a matter of perspective there. I
Yeah, it
think,
was
one of the
tough times. Yeah.
things
Transition.
I was thinking about is like, compared to when I started, or maybe even a couple of years before that, when I was starting to work around the UK world, like the world of extension too. It it feels like attention spans and or the amount of things competing for our attention. The attention spans have maybe gotten shorter, and things competing for our attention have gotten stronger.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And the way that,
I mean, there's so many different ways, like we talked about, like how we deliver information. At any one day, you're getting information from 10 different types of sources,
yeah.
visually and audible sources and print sources. It's pretty incredible it's a juggling act. Yeah.
And like I remember when I was a kid, and this was not that long ago, my parents reading a physical newspaper, and that's almost a rare sight now. And I'm not the boomer who's like everything's going away and everything's bad now, and I don't agree with that at all. But I do wish sometimes that people would have a little more patience for nuanced or more difficult, or yeah, they want like a very straightforward answer, which things like
Hmm.
ChatGPT are often very willing to give you, even if it's not the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me, AI. And I think that that's something I feel like we've probably lost. I do think though at the same time the amount of potential for connection that still exists within internet technologies is
Hmm.
pretty crazy and pretty
Yeah.
wild, that you can
Hmm.
find, people who are in your same on your same wavelength,
Communities of interest. Yeah.
and that it's absolutely essential for the way that we do extension, that people are able to do that. They're able to
Yeah.
find us because otherwise, maybe they think unfairly or fairly that their local office doesn't have, interest in doing what their small scale whatever, or they wouldn't do farmers market or something like that, and then they find our stuff, and then that might end up allowing for, like, I can't imagine doing my job without the internet. um
No, no,
like
not
the way that it
now.
plays to my strengths, and so that's something I think, we've gained. People like to talk about the
No,
internet
yeah.
as a bad thing now because there's so many toxic places, and there have been toxic places in human culture as long as humans have been in them.
It's just now we're
So
more connected with it.
yeah, and you can
Save us from
voluntarily
ourselves. Yeah.
run into the thing that makes your eyes hurt and just spend all your time swiping videos of all these things that upset you and make
Yeah.
you upset and make you mad, and it just hooks you. But and I think that I would say that's bad, if I had to go out on a limb.
Yeah, you could go the algorithms will algorithm hard. If you're in a whatever you look for now, all of a sudden your feeds will be filled with that thing. Whether it's you're wanting to grow asparagus or whatever you're looking for, it's like the world's trying to cater the information to
Yeah.
you or and in some form or fashion.
But
So
as someone who has learned so much from the internet and via the internet, ultimately I've learned from other people through the internet. I'm super grateful for it,
it's just hard
despite
to
all
keep
of
up
its downsides.
to meet people that it's funny. We made a comment the other day, long form video, which they called YouTube. Oh, we don't like long form videos. I was like, what does that mean? And they were like YouTube videos. They just could not imagine being forced to watch a YouTube video. And I was thinking, oh wow, I mean, that's kind of serious. And I know short form video, the rise
Yeah.
of that, where nothing's longer than 2 minutes. I mean, YouTube was cutting edge, and now it's these a minute and a half, 2 minute videos. But I guess my point there being is it's hard to meet people where they're at because there's so many places they're at now.
Yeah.
Some people are still YouTube. Some people are still email. Some people would rather get hit in the toe with a hammer than pick up a
Do
phone
either of those.
and
Yeah.
make a phone call or do either of those.
Oh, to call.
So
Yeah.
yeah, to call. I mean, so it's a constant struggle and it's a balancing act to do the best you can and offer programs that are both online and in person, and to make video content, to make audio content. That's one of our goals with this podcast. We added video content to go along with the audio to try to reach a broader audience. We're always looking for ways to meet people where they are. And with limited resources and limited time, that's tough, but it's something we're still going to work on. And I think universities are doing a better job than they've ever done cataloging their information and pushing that out as best they can with the resources that they have.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest challenge, I think. Me and the job looking within the organization is just, if you've got great information, you have to have great deployment methods, great methods of pushing that information.
Yeah. Well, and to go full meta, as you've already kind of alluded to, that's the point of this podcast for us, is to try to do
Hmm.
something different from what
Another
any of us
format.
had done before.
Yeah.
Not to say, we talk to news, we talk to radio, we do these kinds of canned interviews and stuff like that. But this whole format of an informal conversation where we cover AI, but we also cover tobacco, and we also cover, vegetable interest and co-ops and things. In the wake of that, like that style, we're just trying something new here. And I think we were ultimately looking at it as what would be something that we might want to listen to. And so hopefully you like this. And if you do like this format, we would love for you to go on Spotify or Apple Music or whatever platform you use to listen to this, and leave us a review, ideally a 5-star review. And if there's an opportunity or an option to write some text and share what you like about it, we do read all of those and love to see them. You can also follow us on Instagram at Hortculture Podcast, or you can email us at hortculturepodcast@gmail.com if you have ideas about what types of episodes you'd like to see in the future. We do read all of those emails as well. So thank you to everybody who has been sending in emails and sharing their thoughts. We really, really appreciate the love. And with that, I think I'll leave it, and we'll talk to you sometime down the line.